Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, the show for women who are seeking more fulfillment in life and simply not getting it from their current situation. We focus specifically on careers, but hey, we spend a lot of time in our careers, so making changes here will definitely create an impact in your overall happiness. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and my mission is to empower women to succeed. I believe that in order to powerfully own your career, you must decide and claim that you want to sit in the driver's seat. You must know that you deserve better and be willing to not only do the requisite work, but be willing to go out on a limb to ensure your success. Each episode focuses on profiling a leader who is clearly demonstrating ownership of their career. Join me and my guests as we explore career journeys and bring you actionable strategies to use to get into the driver's seat for your career. Because ultimately, your career is your responsibility. Let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and our guest, Christyl Murray, will be joining us shortly, but just wanted to say hello to everyone and really hope that you are staying safe during this epidemic or pandemic that's going on. I have had lots of thoughts on the mind just with regards to life, with regards to pause, with regards to career, and thinking of how I can be helpful during this time. I hope that the podcast will be a source of inspiration for you during this time of uncertainty as you spend time with your family and really connect and have an opportunity to stop and think about your career and what's next for you, or how you show up in the workplace, or how you show up as an entrepreneur or artist or whatever it is that you're doing. So just thank you for being a loyal listener. I appreciate you. Know that I'm continuing to really look at how I package my career expertise and how I support you during this time. So be sure to really stay connected to the SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org website, particularly the store and what resources are there. If you're not a member of my email list, please go to SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org and go ahead and join that email list. I sure would appreciate staying connected with you and providing additional career expertise outside of the podcast. But we are looking forward to our guest joining us and learning her career story. She is a VP of Talent Development at JPMorgan Chase, and I'm sure she's going to give us some insightful insights on owning your career in the corporate space. So excited to have her join us and excited to again be with you. I have to tell you that I record the podcast via Zoom, and it's super exciting because on Twitter yesterday, I learned that I can add a virtual reality background. And so I've been playing with that, and it's super cool. So you may even see this podcast on my YouTube channel. So by the way, if you're not connected to me via YouTube, you can go over to the YouTube channel, and I will go ahead and post this episode to the YouTube channel so you can see what I'm talking about. So be sure to subscribe on YouTube as well. And as always, if I haven't mentioned it lately, please go to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating for this amazing podcast. I just read a review yesterday, and I was so touched by the comments and how helpful the podcast is. And that's really my goal during this time, is to keep us all somewhat sane and at peace and learning. So stay tuned for this week's episode of the podcast. Hey, Christyl, how are you doing today?
Oh, Simone, I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast. Super excited about the conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Everybody, I know Christyl, I think it's from Working Mother or Diversity Best Practices, one of the conferences that they do. I'm trying to think if we crossed paths first on LinkedIn or in the Multicultural Women's National Conference.
You know, I can't remember. It's a combination of both, because I loved having the opportunity to put a face with a name. And I know we definitely interacted a couple years in a row at the Multinational Women's Conference. So that's awesome. And I see your posts. I love the work that you're doing, and happy that we connected and are collaborating here.
Absolutely. Likewise, because I see a lot of videos that you're doing on LinkedIn, wherever you show up, just bringing your expertise and thought leadership to the platform. So tell us about the work that you're doing at JPMorgan Chase.
Yeah, so I am the lead of the VP Academy at JPMorgan Chase, and it is a talent development program for diverse vice presidents all across the firm.
That's pretty awesome. So how did you get to that space? Tell us
Yeah,
about, take us through your path, your career.
yeah, sure, certainly. It's kind of an interesting path, Simone, because it's a little different. I grew up in the management consulting industry, so I went to UC Berkeley in California and studied business for undergrad. Then I worked for Gemini Consulting as a research analyst for a couple years. Then I went back to business school. I went to the Wharton Business School, and after that time, I actually came out and I worked at Accenture. So Accenture is another management consulting firm. I worked in their organization and change strategy practice. And so I feel like I really have been in the same space in terms of leadership development or design, but a little differentiation in terms of genre. Although I will say that as a consultant, I do feel like you're a professional problem solver. You're collaborating with your clients to create strategies that you ultimately leave, for them to implement. And so it is, I think, a transfer of knowledge, and that kind of started my path in the development and training space.
Well, the first thing I thought, Crystal, was based on the schools you're listing is we've got a smart cookie on this podcast. And what I want to know is, how did you plan out that path? Because it seems like it's very methodical in terms of your path and what you wanted to do. So take us back a little bit, back to the younger Crystal, and how you made those decisions and how important education is obviously to your journey.
So that's a good question, Simone, because I don't know if it was actually as structured and thoughtful as it may seem. However, I will say that when I was an undergrad, I had a really I think monumental experience when a company came into one of our classes. They quote unquote pretended like they were management consultants. They gave us a problem to work on and have us analyze it and present our findings back. And that really sparked my interest in consulting and in problem solving. But then from there, Simone, I was really lucky to benefit from a program called Inroads. And with Inroads, they offer internships earlier than historically would have been offered. So maybe it was in my first or second year of undergrad. And I had the opportunity to work with Deloitte. And I rotated through a variety of different departments. I mean, consulting, marketing. I sat at the reception desk like way back in the day, but it was a really great program to introduce minority students to opportunities in business. And I do feel like that, shaped me in my formative years. In reference to education, my grandmother was an educator, and so she actually worked in the K through 12 space, but was from St. Lucia and really always emphasized having a strong education, being smart, giving back, but really having that facilitated through hard work and education. And that has kind of helped me, not kind of, but I think significantly helped me in my career path as well. Even when I took a break from corporate America after business school, I worked for Accenture for about 6 years, and then I took an entrepreneurial jump. I left my job, so it's taking a risk, and I purchased a franchise for Caldwell Banker. And it was a great opportunity to learn, design, deliver a business, but just not the best time, right? I think I opened my office in 2006, and the market was actually tanking. But I mean, it was a great opportunity for me to learn. And a business model with a franchise is one such that you have a lot of agents and you take kind of a cut on the growth that you're helping to facilitate. So at that time, I was able to keep the company afloat by not having as many agents, but that really is not the appropriate model for a franchise. And when I was coming back into corporate America, I will have to tell you, and I encourage all women to really think about this. You say, I seem smart and, very awesome. After taking a break from corporate America, making that jump back in was not as easy, right? Even with, great education, great background. And so I was actually approached historically by a woman to come in to NYU as the subject matter expert and deliver a class. And so when we talk about the value of maintaining relationships, when I was coming back to corporate America, I reached out to her. She said, "Why don't you try delivering a class?" And I said, "Let me think about it. It's not really what I was necessarily looking to do, but I do feel like consulting is a transfer of knowledge. You're teaching, you're helping individuals to leverage strategies that you've designed. That's very much like teaching and very much like training." And so in 2013, I began to teach as an adjunct, right, just on the side, but it was phenomenal in terms of giving me that voice, giving me that control and ownership of a platform, right? And surprisingly enough, after having adjunct professor attached to my name, in addition to the Wharton MBA and the degree from UC Berkeley, somehow I was more awesome, and it was really very interesting to me because I'm like, I'm the same person, but the advice I would say is for women or anyone coming back, if you do take some time off, make sure that you continue to um, ensure that you're relevant, like in corporate America. So get a credential, study, teach, make sure that you're involved in the area where you think you might want to go back. So you have that consistency of a plan and a design. And so again, I can't say that it was necessarily thought out, but it has been, I think, super additive in terms of making me a more successful, well-rounded executive. And I would take even the time that we're in now with everyone, rightly so, concerned about being together and connectivity. Having had very early on the opportunity to teach online and command an online presence has been very valuable now as we are rolling out many of our programs virtually.
Awesome. I have so much to say. One is I connect from a Caribbean upbringing background because I'm
Hmm.
originally from Jamaica. So education was a very important push in my household as well. And
Hmm.
I think it's interesting your background, Christyl, because not only were you an entrepreneur at a point in time, but you're an intrapreneur. So putting those two together, what do you think your formula is for owning your career, for taking control of your career and winning in your career?
Okay, so I've been thinking about that for a while now, particularly, in my role with the VP Academy, we do bring in various speakers and they provide insights as to what they think, the secret of success is or what helped them. And I do think that that's very subjective. So for me, I put together a little acronym, and it probably is going to date me because I don't know why I love the movie Pretty Woman, but I loved it when she was seeing her friend and she was like, walk, so work it, own it. And so for me, when I think about the work it, own it, I start with the W. So the W is I really do think we all have more in common than we think we do. And so we are living in a world of real divisiveness. But if you take the opportunity to get to know people just like you and I, we've known one another for a while, but we didn't know that we had the Caribbean background. If you talk to people and you go past just face value, you really will see that we do have more in common than not. And so it's important to realize that because relationships are so important in terms of facilitating your success. And so for the O or the E on work it, whichever you decide, I think you definitely have to have outstanding deliverables. You have to be awesome at your work and excellent, because in terms of brand building, your brand really should be built on the quality of your work, right? You don't want to just be known and have 6,000 a million connections in LinkedIn for being a social butterfly. No, you want your brand to be grounded in the outstanding work that you're delivering. And I think that that should always be first and foremost when you're thinking about, how to position yourself. You asked me earlier about risk taking. And so I do think it is important to take calculated risks, to push yourself a little bit further than your comfort zone, or you will not grow. And I do start it by taking, a qualified, calculated risk because you want to make sure that it's researched, that it's well thought out. But if you never take a risk, then you'll never really move forward. And then K is the funny one that I've been thinking about because, it was mentioned to me, I think one time in a very negative way, like kick rocks. And so I'm like, kick rocks. So my K, I'm going to take that negativity and I'm going to turn it around. So kick rocks. Yes, I think for the K, you really want to kick rocks. And those rocks are those negative thoughts or those negative perceptions that sometimes we might have in reference to ourselves, right? Sometimes there's a little voice in yourself saying, you know, you can't do it, or you shouldn't be here, or you're not qualified enough. Kick those out of your mind, because if you have a seat at the table, honey, you deserve to be there, and you need to work in that genre, right? So own it, and kick rocks. But in kicking, understand that other people might also feel the same way. And you could see the most senior, the most awesome executive, and he or she sometimes has that self-doubt. So I think as a leader, it's also important to bring people along. And so I go back to my dad, who had no boys, right? He really wanted us to be tomboys. So he would take us out to the pond or to the lake and skip rocks, right? But when you skip rocks on the lake, you'll see the waves that it's creating. And I want you to think about that in terms of bringing people along, lift people up, say something positive, recognize the work of others, because that really is contagious and it creates positive waves. So it's really like knowing your value and recognizing the value of others. And then the last part, I mean, we're connected there as well. I think you have to own it. You have to own your positive attributes. You have to own your mistakes, or where you have opportunities for improvement. You have to own your career, because you can't be heads down and just hope that somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder and try to push you forward. If you're lucky, that may happen, but it's really because you've owned it, you've defined it, you've put it out there that this is what you want, and then you actually have to go for it. So it's a long-winded way to say, girl, you got to work it, own it.
What is play? I had someone on last week, and I asked
Mhm.
her what was her theme song, and she had like four. I had Precious Williams on, and she had four songs in her head. And so when I hear "Work It," I know you talked about Pretty Woman and the origin of that, but what song is playing in your head when you're working it?
Oh my gosh. So I like to run, and I'm the type of person that I don't really buy music, so I don't have like a playlist. Whatever comes on, I listen to it. So what song do I like as of late? Oh my gosh, my daughter will probably kill me, but I think I'm liking Calling All the Monsters now. It's like a little Disney song. It's very cute. It's like calling all the monsters, like bring your fierce self out. And I think we have to bring our fierce self, or even better stated, put on your game face, because I learned that very early on. Everyone feels a little anxiousness and butterflies, but just say, you know what, you have to do it. So put on your game face and go out there. And that helps me every time. I'll do a class or do a presentation in front of a zillion people. You still feel butterflies, so you just have to say, you're awesome, you can do it. Go out there calling all the monsters.
I love it. I can see you saying that to your daughters. It's an awesome affirmation. Go out there and get it done. So let's go back to the R for a moment, because I think some people can use some help. You were talking about risk and sort of your process for evaluating. I know you mentioned calculated, but how do
Hmm.
you go about evaluating whether this is the right thing to allow you to embrace a career opportunity that's going to give you
Hmm.
that growth? What goes through your mind? What are the things that someone can think about just to take on and appreciate a risk?
Yeah, I think really being able to be thoughtful about the pros and the cons. So I'll give you an example from what I think was like the highest risk. So the highest risk that I think I took several years ago was actually leaving a great job at Accenture. I was making great money. I was doing very well. Um, and to say, I want to try to do something for myself, right? That's a huge risk. I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have kids. So really that risk I was taking on myself, but it was a significant risk. I had a mortgage and student loans and things of that nature. So to me, that risk was a little bit more calculated, in the sense that I took a sabbatical. So at that time with Accenture, you had an opportunity to perhaps leave for a year and then come back. Over that year, you were paid like very, very nominal. I don't even know if you were paid that much, but it was very nominal. What I thought was awesome was you got to keep your computer and you got to keep your health care. Um, And I knew that what I was making was going to be enough to at least cover my student loans. And so that was a huge risk leaving, but I felt like I had a basket, right? A little bit of a security basket if I needed to come back and while I was making that risk. So that was one. I think in terms of career pivots or changing, it's important when you're thinking through this. For me, for instance, leaving consulting and then going into development, talent development, what are the areas that are transferable? How can I demonstrate how what I have done historically will help to benefit what I'm doing now? And really being able to market and kind of craft your brand in that way. And I think it's important when you're doing your resume building, to say, if I'm looking for this particular job, even though I haven't necessarily done that exact thing, what have I done in my past that demonstrates that I can, in fact, excel at something else? And that's a really retrospective, subjective way of looking at it. But you have to know, again, what you're good at, what you're not, and be able to make those ties and those connections for people that might not be immediately, obvious. And I remember one of my friends from Accenture, no names given. So he was like, so you're just going to all of a sudden turn yourself into like, this development person. I'm like, well, yes, I am. I'm going to do that. I'm going to say, this is who I am. And these are the things in my background that demonstrates that I can do this. And then over time, you're able to build that and fill in those gaps. And yes, you can transform yourself. And if we're not always continuing to transform, continuing to innovate, then it's going to be difficult to contribute because the world around us is changing, right? I'm very different from who I was before. And I'm at a point where I feel like I'm still looking to grow and have a greater impact.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's take a little bit of a pause and tell me, can you think of a time in your career where you were not owning your career and what you did to put yourself back on track?
I think if I go back to the time where I was coming back into corporate America, really, I think that experience was very humbling, but it did give me a chance to look at a variety of like other areas to make appropriate steps to where I wanted to go. So I said, I want to have this particular type of job, and I'm going after those jobs, but I'm not necessarily, landing all the offers. What can I do that's going to position me to move forward? And so that's really how I looked at it. So I first, again, like in 2013, I was just doing adjunct at NYU. And when I say just, that's an awesome role. Like people would, fight and want to do that. So I was really happy to contribute. I took a class and turned it into my own, like leveraging my background. So I gave students an opportunity to hear from professionals in the consulting world, and I brought them in as guest speakers. I actually took my students to Deloitte and to other businesses to deliver their final presentations, right? Like for their finals, as opposed to a test, give them a presentation. But for me, it also helped in growing connections, growing my business acumen, staying connected, and I leverage that to do work for a smaller consulting firm, and then come back to a larger institution like JPMorgan Chase. And I smile when I say that because even, having studied finance in undergrad at UC Berkeley and going to Wharton, which is a total finance school, I never really wanted to be, a financial professional. And I am, in fact, am not. I'm still in the same genre of leadership development, talent development. And so it's important for people to really look at the space that they're wanting to go to and look for those opportunities to leverage and lean in with your strengths, right? So I'm at a bank, but I'm not a banker. I am doing what I am awesome at. I'm firm-wide talent development. I'm happy. And I really think that when you're looking to compete, people have to be comfortable with where they are. Because if I was going head to head with some guy or girl who loved finance, I could maybe muster through, but I'm not going to beat them because I don't love it. You have to, really do what you love and find those opportunities to carve out your niche. And so I've been really quite pleased about the contributions I've been able to make here now since 2016 with JPMorgan Chase. Yep, do what you love.
I love that. I have a sign in my office that says "Do what you love," and
Hmm.
it's just a reminder because you can get caught up and move very far away from what you love by doing other things and taking your hand
Yes.
off the wheel. So I love what you just said. There's a couple things that you said that really resonated with me and that I believe in as well. The sabbatical. I think it's
Hmm.
great. What a great offering that some companies provide. I took a 3-month unpaid sabbatical, and boy,
Hmm.
was it a memorable experience for me in terms of getting my head together with what do I really want to do, and why am I doing this, and what's my
Hmm.
path forward. And so I think it's great that Accenture offered you that opportunity. You took advantage of it and tried some different things at that time. Really awesome.
Yeah, and Simone, I think it's important to be flexible with the time constraints that we place on ourselves. Like I actually remember I received admission to the Wharton Business School, but they said it was deferred admission, right? So I had to like go in a year. They wanted me to have more work experience, and I was like, what? But thinking about that, yes, if you want to pull something from a program, it's great to have real live work experiences to be able to apply back to the role. So it wasn't the way I timed it, but it was awesome. And then I remember too, I took a year off and I won a Rotary Scholarship and I studied in Madrid for a year. And it was so phenomenal going back to that W, just realizing that we all have more in common than you think. So living and learning another culture really did indicate to me that we are so much more alike. And it opened my eyes in terms of, global opportunities, global business, culture, connectivity. But yes, did it take me an additional year to do that? But oh my gosh, that additional year was awesome. And so I always think about it, and I say this in jest, but I'm like, if we're still alive, then there's still an opportunity to continue to grow. So if it's going to take me 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, 3 years, I'm still going to go for it because hopefully I'm still alive and I want to be able to contribute and to learn and to grow.
You'll still be alive. You've got a legacy to create, beautiful children to guide and be that role model.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
yes.
I'm staying
But
positive
someone
with
will say, well, why would you go after this now if it's going to take, 5 years to do it? Because I'm still going to be live in 5 years, and that's going to be 5 years well spent pursuing my goal, right? It goes back to like, do what you love.
I love that you're saying that because I kind of remember considering a PhD and I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to take so long to get it done. But honestly, if I had done it when I first said I was going to do it, I would already have it. So I love what you're saying there.
And so I'm going to put in a plug for the PhD project because last year I guess I won the opportunity to go to the conference where they really are looking to increase representation in business schools. And I think Simone, you can still do it. You can still do it. So
Yes, indeed. I went to the we have a
did
lot in
you?
common. As I'm hearing you talk, I'm like, we have a lot in common that we did not know. I also went to the
You
conference
did.
and I was
See?
very inspired. It's
Hmm.
KPMG still or
KPMG
Mhm.
Foundation, yes. So Bernie Milano, he just retired, I think, this year, but he invited me, and I went through the application process, and it was just so phenomenal. And I just went this like several months ago, so just the last one that they had, and I still keep in contact with many of the people that I've met there for research, for business, and I do think it's important when we say. Think about again that wave that you can create, so having people in those roles, you're teaching, you're creating business leaders, you're showing that representation that I think is really important for women and minorities and people just in general to see people that they feel they can connect to.
Mhm, mhm. Awesome. Well, speaking of connecting, as we begin to wrap the interview, tell me about resources online or otherwise that you have found to be helpful in owning your career.
I think the one that I would really focus on has been LinkedIn. Because I feel like LinkedIn gives you an opportunity to research, to learn. There's so much content now that's being distributed on LinkedIn. You have the opportunity to look at different individuals to see, XYZ is doing this. Let me see what they did in terms of background and positioning to get greater insights to, how they built their career. That connectivity, I think, is very powerful, although I do think that it has to be done in the right way, right? It's an opportunity for you to make one touch point, but you really do have to grow a relationship with someone, as opposed to just, reaching out to them and saying, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn, can you get me a job? Like, that's not as rich as really growing a relationship. So I think using it in an appropriate way. But yeah, definitely for the content, for the opportunity to communicate and distribute your own personal brand. I think people will Google you, right, and look at your LinkedIn or whatever comes up in Google before they will look at your resume. So it's important to be able to position. And then, yes, you mentioned earlier that you'll see me like doing my videos and whatnot at different venues that I've been invited to. And I think it's really important to have an opportunity to bring an event to life and to really connect with people. And it definitely does provide that opportunity. So I would say LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm going to bring two things together to ask my next question. And
Okay.
it's because of what you said before about sort of that imposter syndrome, or how some of us have trouble believing we belong at the table. I encounter people who are afraid to show up and show out on LinkedIn. To
Hmm.
me, there's still some barriers to entry because people are thinking about, I'm going to be judged by the content I pose, all these other things. What advice can you share from that perspective?
Yeah, I think it is important to recognize that in this day and age, we are always being judged. You're being judged from the moment somebody looks at you, from the moment you open your mouth. So we can't be fearful of that, right? Because, when I walk into a room, somebody is judging me. And what you hope is they expect you to be there for that particular role. But if that's not their expectation, then it gives you an opportunity to prove it, to demonstrate that by your interaction with them. So you shouldn't be afraid to put yourself out there, because there's no closed doors anymore. Like, everything is publicized. And that's something, surprisingly enough, that I realized when I was living in Madrid, because Madrid is a more homogenous society. And so I always felt like all eyes are on me, all eyes are on you, right? And so if all eyes are on you, then there is an opportunity for you to make a mistake, right? But then there's also an opportunity for you to shine. So look for those opportunities to shine. Be thoughtful in what you present about yourself. Read and spell check and get others to be, your partners in crime, and read your stuff before you post it. And then just, be very thoughtful and keep in mind, I think it's important for you to define who you want to be and who you want to be perceived as, and then try to ensure that everything that you're doing kind of falls in that definition. Now, I will say, for me, I have been a little bit more like flexible and open with some of the things that I post, because I do feel like LinkedIn is very, very professional. And I do remember historically saying, okay, so I don't want to be defined as like the mom or the working mom, or even where we were invited and we met one another at a conference. I will honestly tell you that originally I wanted to go to some other like executive conference, right? And I got nominated to go to the Working Mother conference. And I was like, working mother, I want to be just known as like an awesome executive, not necessarily a working mom. And then I said, wait a minute, I am a working mom. That's who I am. You have to own it. And I love that aspect of myself. And if I was trying to hide that, I wouldn't be as successful. And guess what? I took so much more from that conference. It was so awesome that I said, shame on me for not wanting to be who I am. And so, sometimes, like just yesterday, I put the post of myself wearing this crazy St. Patrick's Day hat with my daughter, because we're home, right? We're sheltering in, we're working from home, we're homeschooling. And I said, I want to take 30 minutes for lunch, and I'm going to practice, because I'm practicing for my own job. I'm like, I'm going to practice. We're going to do this webcast. We're going to read a story to second graders. I send them a Zoom meeting, and I put on my hat and I read to them. And I posted that because I think it's important for people to see that we are multifaceted. And when people get an opportunity to know who you are, they see that it's feasible, right? And that everyone has like their story.
I love that on so many levels. I love that. I'm gonna go look for that hat because I missed
Yeah, it's
it. I
it's
missed it.
green. I just posted it yesterday. That's my very last post. And I have to tell you, these little second graders were a hard crowd. I had to be very energized. But guess what? I put on my game face, right? They're different game phases. I'm like, I'm reading this. And it was some St. Patrick's Day story. But it was very cute and it rhymed. So I had to be on my best game. But it was fun and it helped me to, again, it's really important to think about in this day and age, how can you have a commanding presence online? The way we interact with our colleagues, our clients, our audiences is online. And so you have to be comfortable and you have to know the various platforms. Am I chatting? Am people raising their hands? Am I talking? What can I do? It's really important to have a strong command of that. And I'm going to give, more credit to NYU, Dr. Baker, who originally reached out to me to be a subject matter expert. She has since passed, but she was really awesome. And she's like, honey, why don't you try this? And it really, really was transformative in terms of my career, finding my voice, leveraging it, and posting it.
I love that. What a nice way to wrap up. So it has been my pleasure to bring you to the wonderful Power of Owning Your Career audience. Christyl, tell people how they can stay connected with you or reach out to you if they'd like to.
Yeah, so the best way to reach out to me is definitely via LinkedIn. I'm Christyl_Murray. Just send me a connection note and I pretty much accept everyone and we can begin, a conversation from there.
All right. Well, thank you for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thank you so much, Simone. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. It is my hope that you enjoyed today's episode. You can check out the show notes for this episode on the SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org website by clicking the podcast menu. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and tell a friend or two about it.